course, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, a very warm welcome back to all of you to the course in Values and Spirituality. For those of you who are just joining us, we are looking at non-punitive methods of correction in book 2 of the course. I would like to welcome Sister Denise into our studio today. Sister Denise, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you very much.
We ended off the last episode discussing non-punitive methods of correction, and because we didn't finish that discussion, we decided to split this discussion into 2 episodes. And in this particular episode, we will be looking at that topic, but more so in the context of rehabilitating somebody, rehabilitating an individual in that position. You must be aware that there will be a number of individuals watching you right now or reading this book and think, I am sorry, what? Are you out of your mind? Okay. Some may even go so far as to say that this is total hogwash, what you're proposing, and also that this soft touch, this soft glove approach could encourage criminality, could encourage errant, antisocial, ugly behavior in human beings. Because it's too soft, it's too feminine, too wishy-washy. It doesn't provide structure to human beings as far as their conduct is concerned. There would be no reason not to perpetuate criminal behavior.
I think that we have to look at what causes a person to do an act which is against the principles of karma philosophy. And I'm going into karma philosophy now as opposed to the 2 opposing man-made value systems. Spirituality says that all people, regardless of how they behave, all people are fundamentally spiritual beings, and the inherent qualities of a spiritual being are purity, peace, power, love, and bliss. Anyone who is filled with those qualities, or where those qualities are present to a maximum degree, the behavior will reflect that that is what's on the inside. A person who is operating in opposition to that indicates more than anything else that that person is completely devoid of those qualities, which means that that person is spiritually depleted. A person is weak. It doesn't mean the person is bad, it means they're weak. So when you have somebody who's weak, what you need to do is to strengthen them.
Okay, I want to stop you there. If you encounter somebody who's weak, why is it the responsibility of B or C or D to strengthen A when B or C or D did not contribute to A's weakness?
Well, when you are caught for performing a crime, it's the state that punishes you, you know. And so if the state punishes you, then it means the state has taken on the responsibility to limit that person in what they're free to do. Now, we also have to see if the state has contributed in any way to creating their spiritual weakening. And it may or it may not have, but it's something to look at. We also need to see what are the things that cause a person to be spiritually weak. And there are many things. What happens is, with this approach that I'm taking, we're challenging some very common social behaviors or social attitudes, which has a tendency to say or to speak in generalizations. say all these people are criminals. And they will criminalize a whole section of the population. Anyone who lives in the slum, by definition, is a criminal. You know, this is a very, very commonly held idea. This is actually false. Many may be, but you cannot say that everyone is. It's dehumanizing. So you dehumanize the people in advance of any crime being committed. You provide lower quality education. The community is experiencing poverty, which is very stressful, and a lot of time where there is poverty, there's also alcohol abuse. So you have a whole setup which is designed to intensify the likelihood of criminal behavior. And you're saying, well, it's not my fault, it's their fault. So you are criminalizing the victim. It happens very often to women who are sexually harassed or sexually abused. It's always their fault because of the social attitude that says, oh, well, a man would never do something like that unless he was provoked. Excuse me, there's no evidence of that. You see. So what I'm challenging is some of these social attitudes which are really based on prejudice, and that if you are operating on the basis of prejudice and you're criminalizing a whole bunch of people with your generalizations, then you know you need to be challenged. And I think if we start looking at the philosophy of karma in all of this, we have another angle to look at it on. Labeling is part of it.
What do you mean by that?
These people are criminals. This person is a thief. You know, a person stole, got caught. There may be special circumstances or all sorts of things can be there. It's a one-time event. And yet they got the label, and that's the end of their opportunity to function in the society. When you have somebody who has performed antisocial behavior, the question I would ask is, do you want to reintegrate that person into civic life or not? Very important question. And if the criminal justice system has behind its activities the aim to reintegrate people into the social system, that's one approach. But it doesn't go without saying, you know, generally speaking, once somebody is entered into the criminal justice system, gets a record, that's it. They are condemned to stay within that. So that you get a very large number of people occupying prisons that are designed for a small number of people. And then you get a problem of overcrowding, which again creates a stress, which creates criminal behavior within the prison system. So the whole thing is designed, in my view, to fail. And maybe they want it to fail, I don't know. But what I'm looking at is the idea, the concept of rehabilitation. Because it's seen that pretty much all violent crime is performed by people who have been violated, it means that that person requires therapy. That means a person has been damaged. Now, if you have a damaged person and you punish that person for being damaged, what are the values that you're operating on? You're operating on values that say privileged people are better than less privileged people, and we're going to make sure to keep that. You see? And what I'm saying is that the values that promote that kind of idea are values that are against the principles of spirituality. They're very expedient. but they do not take into consideration the fact that the person you're punishing is an immortal soul. And there is a karmic impact on all of this. So when we look at the idea of rehabilitation, you put a person into an incarceration. What you want to do is to get that person to say, honestly, whether they think what they did was good or bad.
Sister Denise, I'm going to stop you there. The first question that comes to mind as I listen to you speak is there's an expression in the legal profession, and I've heard this and I've seen this in a judgment actually from the High Court. The best judge of future behavior is past behavior. I'd like for you to address that. And I also want to take you to paragraph 4 of page 22. A non-punitive approach to correction would include establishing and maintaining a good rapport with the person. Their negative or antisocial action needs to be described to them, and you need to explain clearly why you consider it wrong. Ask them if they also think it is a wrong action. What was their motivation, stimulus, or justification? What were the surrounding circumstances? Refer them to their own conscience. Sister Denise, the first question I have for you, as far as this quote is concerned, is something that I read in a judgment in the High Court, my country. One thing that the judge said was that the best judge of future behavior is past behavior. Whether you did this commission of inquiry or not, how do you know whether this method of rehabilitation will change somebody's behavior?
When you look at the judgment that you mentioned, I will say this refers to sanskaras. And it's absolutely right that it is normal for a person to continue a particular form of behavior. But what it doesn't look at is what caused it in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you say a person who performs violent action is generally somebody who was severely violated in childhood, so the first thing you need to do is find out, is this the case in this person's situation?
That is usually taken into account after conviction when it comes to mitigating for sentence purposes, not before conviction in the usual course of the criminal justice system. But you are taking it deeper than that, aren't you?
Okay, a person did a violent crime, they are convicted, now they are given a sentence, whatever that sentence is, X number of years in this or that place. Now once they're in that place, now what are you going to do with them? So this is the time when you need to really take a look at what are the origins of this? Because if you're punishing a person for being a victim, it doesn't make sense. See, if you punish a person because they made somebody else into a victim, it makes total sense. If you see, okay, this person is violent because of some violation in childhood, and you don't address that violation in childhood, then the minute that person comes out of jail, they're going to go back and do it again. And so why would you bother not to put them in for life? Why don't you just kill them? You know, and then your value-based people will say, well, you can't do that. But you see, there's double standards coming in here. And because people are just insensitive because of the labels. So, oh, this is a murderer, therefore, therefore, therefore. No, this is a human being who may have been victimized, and that this is a normal consequence of their life experience.
You've written this 16 years ago, and I need to ask, have you actually used this in with criminals, or have you used this?
I've used this with people who've been victimized by crimes that didn't get to court. I've used it with criminals who have been incarcerated. I've used it with people who got away with stuff. I've used it in circumstances where what one society would call a crime, another society would not call a crime. A lot of the areas where I've used it is where it doesn't ever get to the criminal courts, but the family deals with it or fails to deal with it, and you just have a bunch of people who are suffering. I've done this with people who are in self-help programs, and so looking at it in a number of different environments. I've also done it in environments where young people are in very high pressure environments which are quite punitive on the part of the people who are controlling them, and really limiting their ability to feel their natural freedom and so on. I've done it in societies where women and girls are really held in subjugation, and worked with those women and girls to get a little free from that social system that promotes that subjugation.
I'm glad that you've given me such a varied answer, because my next question is, could you tell our viewers and readers whether you've had any proof that this actually works, that whether people have been rehabilitated, whether they've returned to their previous behavior or not?
You know, a lot of this is very, very subtle, because a person's values and the way that their environment punishes them is entirely separate from the criminal justice system. You may be a person of color in a society which is racist, and that racist society will punish you because of your color, and they're not doing things that are illegal, but they're still punishing you, and they still put you in a position where you are victimized and you are damaged, you see, but because it's legal, it's considered all right, you know. Or you may be a person who is not your normal heterosexual, and so you'll be very badly affected by prejudice, sexual prejudice. Women in the workplace are very much affected by sexual harassment, but because it's not, you know, proved, then it will be said, well, it's your imagination. And so this really applies very much in those kinds of areas, because what you need to do is to enable the person to distinguish between when they're doing something wrong and when they're being victimized. So they're being made to think that they're bad, but they're actually not. And so teaching people how to stand up for themselves is very important.
I must admit, I really enjoyed the last part of this section. When an individual feels that they have been heard and respected, and they agree that what they did was wrong, it is possible to inspire them to behave in a socially responsible, honest, and self-respecting way. Encourage them to make a personal commitment to act according to their own moral conscience, so that they understand their accountability and change their patterns of action. If this is the result of what you're doing, then I'm all for it.
I've been in a situation where someone was identified as untrustworthy and so on and so forth. They stole, they embezzled and so on, but they wanted a chance. And a person employed them and entrusted them, knowing that that's a risk. because that person has been shown to be untrustworthy. But the trust that that employer gave to that employee and the relationship that they created actually enabled that person to change completely. So you do get examples of this. I don't think you can say that this sort of thing is a blanket solution, because person's socially deviant behavior is full of complications, and some people are weaker than others. Some people will actually do the meditation, they really want to get their act together, get their life together. Other people have given up on themselves. So there are many, many factors. But what I'm saying is that there are certain things that we need to challenge in terms of prejudice that needs to be challenged. There are certain things like labeling that needs to be challenged, certain habits that are very widespread in the society that need to be challenged. And you challenge it by raising the subject and saying, don't talk about someone like this because that's not right. Talk about them like this. If you say you have plenty of values, then add this one to it.
So what you're saying is that this cannot be used for every single criminal and every single person who displays antisocial behavior. It won't work for everybody, it'll only work for some people.
Well, just as any blanket solution doesn't work for everybody. I mean, you say, okay, the best way to deal with criminals is put them all in prison. It may or it may not be. It may be for some, it may not be for others. You really need to be able to look at people on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, on that note, I'm going to refer you back to what you said at the bottom of page 24. Refer them to their own moral conscience. In your experience, does every human being have a conscience? Are there individuals who do not have a conscience?
Every human being has a conscience, but some people's conscience has been destroyed through various means. And most people's conscience is pretty dysfunctional. And there are many things that can be done to sharpen it and make it functional or to make it sharp from blunt, clear from fuzzy. And if a person's conscience is totally destroyed, they're in a very, very tiny minority.
Thank you for that. This was, I think, from all the discussions that we've had in values and education in spirituality thus far, this has been my favorite one because it's unusual and, like I said, deeply humane, and it goes against the current of the world's direction at the moment. It goes in the opposite direction as far as being kind and humane is concerned. So many blessings for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, and I do hope to see you soon for the next episode. Take care and goodbye.